Welcome to Daedalus Debugger, a podcast series conceived by Lucianoambrosini and co-created with me, Ive. Today we will discuss From D3 to D4, the emergence of the dialectic dimension in computational design. Enjoy.
Welcome back to the deep dive, everybody. We're diving into some really fascinating stuff today, all about how design is changing, especially in fields like architecture, engineering, and construction. People in the industry usually just say AEC, so we'll probably say that a lot too. But we've been looking at this idea of the data-digital-design axis, and it's usually shortened to just DDEVO. And
it's been this big driving force for a while now, hasn't it? Just completely reshaping how we approach projects. I mean, really pushing digital processes and using data to make smarter design decisions.
Yeah, and it really comes down to taking all that raw data, all that information, and figuring out, well, how do we turn it into something that makes sense, that gives us those optimized design solutions?
Right, exactly. And a lot of that, is happening right at that intersection of information technology and architectural design. It's where they're really coming together. And that's where this thing called computational design really comes into play.
Computational design, yeah. So that's where we're kind of starting from, right? That's the foundation.
Yeah, you can think of it as that core of the DIA framework. It's really all about translating those big, sometimes kind of abstract design theories into actual buildable projects.
Okay, so that's our starting point. But as we were prepping for this deep dive, there were some pretty big developments, especially in artificial intelligence, that just seem to be pushing things even further.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just look at what's happening with AI right now.
Stuff like generative AI, where it can actually create visuals. They call it GenAI Viz, I think.
Yeah.
And then there's these large language models, LLMs, and they can just crunch through crazy complex analysis and optimization. It's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it really is pushing the boundaries of that D model, I think, in some pretty fundamental ways.
Well, the way I see it, the traditional D model, it always treated technology as more of a tool. Like, yeah, it's a really powerful tool, but it's still something that the designer is kind of wielding, controlling. But what's different now, and this is where it gets really interesting, is how these AI innovations are changing that dynamic. It's not just a passive tool anymore. It's becoming a participant in the design process, like almost a collaborator.
Exactly. I mean, it's offering suggestions, generating options, even analyzing performance in ways that we just couldn't really do before.
So that brings us to what we're really here to explore today, this idea of the Data-Digital-Design-Dialectic. It's a mouthful, I know. It's usually just called DIALO, thankfully. But that word dialectic, it really stood out to me. It suggests a kind of back and forth, right? Like a conversation.
Yeah. That's exactly it. The dialectic is crucial here. It's really trying to capture this dynamic, this evolving relationship between the human designer and these AI systems, which are becoming more and more sophisticated all the time. It's this constant conversation, this real partnership in a way.
A real partnership. Okay. So that's what we want to really unpack in this deep dive, this transition from D to D. We want to understand how it's changing the AEC industry, what it means for someone like you, a designer working in the field. And we even want to touch on what this means for education. Like, how do we even begin to prepare the next generation of designers for this new world?
Yeah.
Oh, and then, of course, we have to talk about some of the bigger, broader implications, the ethical stuff and all that. And a lot of what's informing our deep dive comes from this really interesting survey that looked at digital skills in the AEC sector.
Yes. That survey gave us so much to think about. How are professionals out there actually experiencing this shift? And what about the people who are teaching these skills? What do they think?
Right. It really grounds everything in what's actually happening out there in the industry. Okay, so let's jump into it. Let's talk about this dyno thing, this fourth dimension, this dialectic, whatever we want to call it, and see how it actually works. Like, what are the key things that define it? What makes it pick?
Well, the research we've been looking at, it highlights a few crucial elements. Let me see. The first one is, prompt engineering. As you start working more with AI, you really have to learn how to guide it effectively. And a big part of that is learning to craft really good prompts, almost like learning a new language, so you can really clearly communicate your design intentions to the AI.
Oh, that's so interesting. So you can't just throw any old request at it and expect it to magically come up with something useful.
No, not at all. I mean, you have to be really specific. Think about how you're phrasing things. You need to get good at that to get good output from the AI.
Okay, so that's prompt engineering. What else is there?
Well, right alongside that is critical interpretation. Just because the AI generates a cool design or produces an analysis, it doesn't mean it's right, or even that it's the best solution. You still need your human judgment to evaluate those outputs, understand the context, and then refine what the AI gives you. It's just a starting point, really.
Yeah. So even with AI doing all this amazing stuff, you're still the expert, you're still the designer, you're the one making the calls.
Absolutely. And that feeds directly into the third element here, which is iterative refinement. This day-off paradigm, it's not linear, it's not like a straight line from problem to solution. It's much more cyclical. It's a back and forth process.
I was just thinking that, like a conversation.
Exactly, a conversation. You give the AI a prompt, it responds, you look at what it gives you, evaluate it, maybe give it a new prompt based on what you see, and it goes on and on like that. This constant dialogue leads to better and better design solutions.
And it's all about integrating your knowledge, your experience into that conversation.
Yes. That's actually the next element, the integration of what they call tacit knowledge. It's your intuition, your years of experience, your understanding of the project, all that stuff that AI can't fully grasp yet, even though it's getting pretty darn good. You bring all that to the table. You make the process richer, more human.
That's such a good point. Good design, it's not just about data points, right? It's about all that experience you build up over time.
Right, exactly. And then finally, you have creative synthesis. The goal here isn't just to have AI do everything for you. You're not just taking orders from the machine. It's about combining your creativity, your human insights with what the AI can do. That's how you get the most innovative results.
It's like a true collaboration. Now, how is this Dilo paradigm actually showing up in the real world? Like, how's it changing things on a day-to-day basis for, the average architect or engineer? That survey must have given us some clues about that.
Oh, it did. It did. Both the survey and the article we read on D.O, they point to some pretty big shifts in how certain parts of the design process are being done. Like take site and context analysis, for example. Now, AI can analyze huge data sets like all the environmental data, social demographics, zoning regulations even, and it can pinpoint constraints and see opportunities that we might miss, and it can do it so much faster than we can.
That would be such a huge time saver, especially at the beginning of a project.
Absolutely. And then when you move into concept design, we're seeing more and more use of generative AI tools. They can create and visualize tons of design alternatives super fast based on whatever parameters you set. It lets you explore so many more possibilities right from the start.
Wow. Like instead of spending weeks coming up with 3 concepts, you could have dozens, even hundreds to choose from. That's wild.
Yeah, it really is. And it can lead to some really unexpected, innovative ideas. And then there's performance simulations. AI can actually predict how a building will perform across all kinds of factors.
Yeah.
Energy efficiency, structural stuff, even costs. It helps you design more efficiently, make better decisions up front.
And hopefully avoid some of those budget blowouts that can happen later down the line.
Exactly. And, communication, it's so important in this field, right? And Day is changing that too. I mean, with GenAI Viz, you can create these amazing presentations like virtual reality walkthroughs or super realistic renderings that help clients really understand and connect with the design. It makes it all so much more intuitive.
It's amazing to think about. Okay, so AI is having a real impact, it seems like, on pretty much every stage of the process. And all these advancements, they're also starting to address some of those big challenges that the AEC industry has been grappling with for a while, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the research we've been looking at, it points to a few key areas where AI, within this Day framework, is making a real difference.
Right.
Obviously, one of the big ones is just saving time, streamlining the whole design process.
Well, time is money, as they say. And I would imagine in a field like architecture, that's especially true.
Very true. Another big one is resource optimization. AI can help us make much smarter choices about materials, about how much energy a building uses, and, of course, about the overall costs. It helps us make projects more sustainable and more efficient, which is something everyone cares about these days.
Yeah, sustainability is such a huge focus now. What else did they highlight?
Managing really complex projects. With the buildings getting more intricate, more technologically advanced, it can be a nightmare to keep track of everything. AI tools can help manage all that, identify potential problems, keep things on track, and keep costs under control.
Every project manager's dream.
Right. And then there's the whole communication piece. Sometimes you have to explain really complex technical stuff to people who don't have that background, like clients, community members, or government agencies. And AI-powered visualizations and analyses, they can really help with that. They make it so much easier for everyone to understand what's going on.
Makes sense. Okay, so it seems like this Dallo paradigm really does have the potential to change how the whole industry works for everyone involved. But with this big shift happening, what does it mean for the designer? Like, how is the role of the architect or the engineer changing?
Well, it's changing in some pretty profound ways. We're not just using different tools. We're rethinking what it means to be a designer in this new landscape. The survey actually asked people for their vision of the future architect or designer, and some really interesting ideas came out of that. One was the idea of the designer as a facilitator, someone who bridges the gap between human needs and what technology can do.
So less of a solo artist, more like a conductor, bringing everything together?
Yeah, I like that. You're orchestrating the whole process, understanding both the human side and the technological capabilities. Then there's the designer as a curator. With AI generating so much stuff, you need someone to sift through it all, figure out what's good, what's not, what's actually going to work.
So it's not just about letting the AI run wild. You're still making those decisions using your judgment.
Exactly. And then there's the idea of the hybrid professional, someone who has skills in all sorts of different areas, not just design, so they can collaborate with AI and all these other experts who are involved in a project. It's much more interdisciplinary.
And that really emphasizes those soft skills that everyone's always talking about, right?
Big time. Communication, teamwork, critical thinking, ethical judgment, all that stuff. It's all becoming even more important. There's a really interesting quote in the article, something like, "The importance of the digital architect in the future will depend more on their ability to use and adapt their soft skills than their hard skills."
Wow. That's a pretty strong statement. So it's not just about learning the tech. It's about all those human skills that AI can't replicate.
Right. It's about how you frame the problem, understand the context, make those ethical decisions, synthesize all that input from the AI into something creative and meaningful. That's where the real value is.
And that obviously has huge implications for education. I mean, how do we prepare people for this new world? The survey mentioned a pretty big gap between what's being taught in schools and what the industry actually needs right now, especially when it comes to AI.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I mean, a lot of schools are just not teaching the digital skills, especially the AI skills that are in such high demand. The article made the point that the business world is already using all this stuff, so academia is really lagging behind.
So how do we bridge that gap? What needs to change?
Well, there are a few big challenges to overcome. One is just resistance to change. Some professors have been teaching the same way for years, and it's hard to get them to change. Another is the curricula. They're often really rigid, and it takes forever to update them.
Yeah. Academia doesn't always move as quickly as the rest of the world.
Exactly. And then there's the fact that technology is changing so fast that it's hard to even keep up. It's like by the time you develop a course on a particular AI tool, it's already outdated.
I can imagine.
And the biggest challenge of all, I think, is finding instructors who really know their stuff, who understand both the fundamentals of architecture and all these new technologies. It's tough to find people like that.
Yeah, it's a real catch-22. You need qualified teachers to teach this stuff, but how do you find them if nobody's being taught it? So what needs to happen? How do we fix it?
Well, the article in the survey had some good suggestions. One is more flexible curricula, something that can be updated quickly as technology changes. Another is more collaboration between schools and the industry. Bring in guest lecturers, do joint research projects, give students real-world experience through internships, that kind of thing.
Really bridge that gap between the classroom and the real world.
Exactly. And it's not just about the tech either. We need to make sure students have a solid foundation in design principles, theory, ethics, all that stuff. It can't just be about how to use the tools.
So they need to understand not just the how, but also the why and the what ifs.
Yes, exactly. And they need to be able to think critically, evaluate what the AI is doing, make ethical decisions. We also need to create learning environments that really simulate this Daedalus process.
Right.
Give students a chance to actually work with AI, to experience that back and forth, that dialectic firsthand.
So it's not just reading about it in a textbook, they're actually doing it.
Anyway.
Now, with all this talk about AI and design, there are some pretty big ethical questions that come up. What are some of the things we need to be thinking about as this technology keeps evolving?
Right. There are a lot of things to consider. Like the whole design process itself is likely to change. The way teams work, how projects are managed, all that stuff will probably need to be rethought as AI becomes more integrated.
So it's not just about adding AI to what we're already doing. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how things work.
Exactly. And designers are going to need to learn new skills, like we talked about. Prompt engineering, being able to critically evaluate the AI's output, being able to synthesize it all into something creative. And then there's the legal stuff. Like, who owns the intellectual property when a design is created with AI? That's a big question that's still being figured out.
Yeah, that's a whole new frontier, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the bigger picture, how AI will impact employment in the industry, how we can make sure it's being used ethically and responsibly, that it's actually making the world a better place.
All really important things to be thinking about.
So to recap, we've really gone deep into this shift from D to day. And it's clear that AI is playing a huge role in this transformation. It's not just a tool anymore, it's a real partner in the design process.
And data is about embracing that partnership, about that back and forth, that dialectic between human and machine. And if we can do that right, there's so much potential for innovation, for more efficient and sustainable designs, for a better built environment for everyone.
Yeah, but it's not just about the technology. It's about changing how we think, how we work, how we teach. It's about collaboration between everyone involved, the educators, the professionals, the tech developers.
We all need to be working together to figure out how to make this work, to establish the right frameworks and guidelines to ensure that this technology is being used for good.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive. It really makes you think about the future of design, about the incredible possibilities, and also about the challenges. And it really leaves us with a question for all of you out there listening. How do you think your own work, your own creative process might change as AI becomes more and more sophisticated? And as we move into this new world of co-creation, what are those uniquely human skills that you bring to the table, the skills that will become even more valuable? It's something to really think about. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
It was great to have you. Until next time.
Thanks for listening. See you on the next episode of Daedalus Debugger, the architect in the digital maze. Bye!